Let's talk about the South. Oh god, YouTube, no, please. The American Civil War was the result of decades of tension between the North and South. We all know how it ended. The United States won, the Confederacy was dissolved, and slavery ended. In that whirlwind of conflict, it's often cast aside that the CSA had full intentions of being a legitimate nation alongside the USA. But as they lost the war, that dream lasted only a brief moment before being snuffed out. The idea of the South winning that war, becoming its own country, and competing against its northern neighbor has fascinated alternate history writers for decades. I mean, I even covered it. It sparks the imagination of how such a nation would have operated after decades, maybe even spanning into the 20th century. What would the Confederate States of America be like? And nobody imagined such a world better than the author Harry Turtledove, who wrote a series of novels detailing an alternate reality where the United States lost the Civil War and the Confederates became their own independent nation. This is the Southern Victory series. Over the course of several novels, we see a world where the South lives on. What I want to do is talk about this world that Turtledove crafted, including the alternate history he made, in an easy-to-digest format. Maybe even a few jokes, who knows. I'm not going to talk about characters, but if you're thinking of reading these books for the scenario alone, then I would recommend clicking off, because there are going to be spoilers. So, since this is alternate history, how does Turtledove's scenario split from our own actual history? What event leads to the South winning the war? One guy doesn't screw it up. Yes, that's it. One lonely messenger actually does his job. How does this happen? In the fall of 1862, a message from General Lee himself is successfully relayed, announcing a full-scale invasion of the North, Special Order 191. In our timeline, that message never made it. It was lost and intercepted by the Union, who then used said information of an invasion to catch the Confederates off guard. Whoops. In this alternate timeline, things are different. The Confederates, while undermanned, had tactically superior generals, and the Union, well, oh boy. Using the Union's incompetence to their advantage, Lee decides to send his troops straight across the Mason-Dixon line and into the city of Philadelphia. The Southern invasion catches Union General George McClellan off guard. The Union forces are viciously defeated, leaving the city open for Confederate capture. The fall of Philadelphia is a turning point in the conflict and in American history. It's the moment that the Northern cause seems hopeless to not only the United States, but the world as well. One constant fear during the war was that the Confederates would use their cotton exports to leverage support from Europe. And in Turtledove's world, this becomes a reality. Britain and France recognize the way the war is going and recognize the cause of the Confederates. Even if they're against the practice of slavery, they sure do like that cotton, and it's always good to side with the victor. So Europe forces the United States to enter negotiations with the South. It's over. The Civil War, or War of Succession as it comes to be called, has come to an end. A peace treaty is signed, and the Confederate States of America is officially recognized. Now, two rival nations are forced to share the same continent. Lincoln's legacy is in shambles. His rise to power is seen as what divided the country, and he's soon voted out of office. Now in our timeline, Lincoln's entire legacy was always on the line. The actions he took were often seen as one of a dictator, and if the war was lost, it would have backfired immensely. So, the CSA now rules itself. Now what? Well, the novels actually skip over a few decades. This is a time for rebuilding and expansion. While the two countries have lived in peace, there is always an undercurrent of tension. The CSA is able to achieve many dreams they actually had in our own history. The great thing Turtledove is able to do is to make these play out, one of which is the purchase of Cuba from Spain. Now in our timeline, Southern power really wanted Cuba, because of the sugar fields and many foreigners that could be exploited. Cuba is purchased and becomes another state in the Confederacy. Not only that, but both North and South have been expanding west in the last 20 years. Indian Territory becomes the Confederate state of Sequoia, and general mucking about occurs in the west. Fun stuff. Not too far west though. Because the US was so poor, they actually couldn't purchase Alaska from the Russians, so Russia just keeps it. And nobody ever went to Hawaii, so the Sandwich Islands are now a British colony. This is the unique turn that a Southern victory has on the legacy of what we think of as America. North America is a much more hostile place. It's a muddled, complicated mess. The relationship between North and South devolves into constantly suspecting each other. Instead of American policy being towards overseas colonies expanding its tiny little empire, both nations are too poor to do much and focus on whatever the other is doing. This has to do with really one thing: slavery, he says as the entire comment section erupts. But Turtledove's novel, rightly so, focuses on the subject of slavery in the Confederacy. You can't avoid it, so I'm not. The issue of slavery comes up many times in the CSA. Even in the 1880s, it's still the bedrock of the South, and by this time, it's become a detriment to the image of the Confederates. Times are changing. With the Industrial Revolution in full swing, the appeal of human labor is less and less. Why keep such a system when another is much more efficient? They've maintained relationships with Britain and France since the war, but both nations constantly remind them of how backwards the Southern economic model is. It's becoming an unneeded pain. So, the CSA itself has a question to ask: what to do about slavery? This is caused by, all places, Mexico. With everything that changed, Mexico is still the same, in debt, and really just a mess. The failing Mexican Empire, in a desperate attempt to get money, sells its two northern states, Chihuahua and Sonora, to the Confederacy. Long story short, the Union doesn't like this southern expansion. The new president is hardline anti-Confederate and threatens war against the Confederates to stop what they're doing. Which wasn't really a smart move since the Confederates legally weren't doing anything wrong. So, what does this have to do with slavery? The Confederates knew that in a war against the Union, they might risk losing everything, and so they needed allies. The British and French would only support the CSA if they stripped away their slavery image. And so the CSA does just that. They begin to slowly get rid of the Institute of Slavery. But before talking about those ramifications, we're off to war. The Second Mexican War, which actually doesn't involve Mexico at all, so good job naming that. Now, the specifics of the war aren't really important. In most regards, it's a repeat of the First War. The US is incompetent, the South holds its own, the Mormons do some rebelling, and the British do some invading. The United States tries to invade the South through Louisville, though this goes horrendously. The fighting is so brutal, it's the first use of trench warfare in modern history, and the US is forced to concede defeat. This defeat shapes the United States' relationship with the rest of the world. The Confederates have shown to be a favorite child of the British and French. This alliance causes deep resentment from the Americans. This is in a time of immigration as well, particularly German. The Second Mexican War is important because the US forever becomes enemies with the British and French, who choose time and time again to side with the Confederates. So the US goes looking for more allies. The heavily Germanic United States finds a natural friend in another underdog country, the German Empire. As the 20th century comes around the corner, secret alliances are drawn, not just as tensions rise in Europe, but on the North American continent as well. Now, this is just one book. Turtledove's Southern Victory series is quite long, far too much content to cover for, say, a 10-minute YouTube video or 20-minute video, so that's why I'm splitting this into a few parts. So, how will I...
Hey, Cody!
Hey, Emperor Tigerstar. Look, this series is far too long to cover by just myself, so how about let's do this? Split it up into 4 parts. I cover part 1 and 3, you cover part 2 and 4.
I mean, that's quite a bit of work, and also, I only came over to ask you to stop.
Well, it's settled then. Fantastic. Part 2 will be on Emperor Tigerstar channel, and then part 3 with mine in July, and so forth.
Do I have a say in the...
This is Cody of Alternate History Hub. This video was brought to you by Squarespace. I'm sure you've heard that name before, but for good reason. Squarespace is a great service that simply lets you create your own website. Squarespace gives you the tools to easily build your own online presence. You can actually get these tools right now and save 10% by signing up using the special link in the description. squarespace.com/althistory. Creators don't have to have the hassle of technology because Squarespace is cross-platform, requires no plugins, and never updates. It simply provides you with an easy way to build your own professional-looking site without worry. If you have any questions, it can help you along the way with 24/7 customer service. It's the next step taken while cutting the stress of expanding your brand. I was able to fully invest in my site, and so far it has come to look extremely professional. It has links to all of my social media accounts where you can stay up to date on anything Alternate History Hub, especially since I'm going to VidCon. This has been an important next move for my business, and using Squarespace has greatly reduced the time and stress of making my site. Just start by saving 10% at squarespace.com/althistory. The link is down in the description for you to start your own site. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.